Hey all, thought I'd check in with you guys for a brief video apropos of the material we're covering right now on the American presidency and more broadly the federal executive branch. Because the election of Donald Trump, who's currently our president-elect, is what we call him right now, our president-elect. He's not president right now, right, but he will be on January 20th. But he is, clearly elected, and so that's the term that we would use. A little insider info from a political scientist. We're talking about presidential power. All right, and we know that, right, each president kind of has their own skill set, their own style of governing. And so there was some things have been happening in the last week and a half or so. The Trump administration rollout in terms of who they want to pick for their key cabinet positions heading up the executive branch federal bureaucracy. All right, Department of Justice, Secretary of State, Director of National Intelligence, Secretary of Homeland Security. He's suggesting names that he hopes to get placed in those jobs pretty quickly. All right, so it's a process, but he's moving unbelievably quickly. Right? I think his administration was ready for this. If they were to win the election, they were ready to roll quickly, and here we go. Plus, right, this is his second time around. This is not his first rodeo. Couple things I wanted to say. One is, right, we know that the Senate we'll have 53 Republicans, 47 Democrats. In the House, we'll have about 220 Republicans and 215 Democrats. That's a very narrow margin in the House out of 435 members. That's very narrow. And actually, 3 of those people have been nominated to serve in his administration. So that could get the number of Republicans in the House down to 217. I know one has resigned very quickly. I'll talk about that in a minute, Matt Gaetz. The other 2, I think, have not yet resigned, but would have to by January, not necessarily by January 20th, but pretty quickly. All right, so that'll be interesting. Right, that gets it maybe, depending on the final numbers, but it gets it probably to 217 to 215 in the House. where Speaker Mike Johnson would have literally no room for error, right? For anything to get done in the House, he would need all Republicans to be there and vote in favor of whatever bill they're working on or whatever budget thing they're working on. That's as tight as it gets, people, as tight as it gets. The Senate, right? Republicans have a nice little margin there, a nice cushion. All right. So, and we know, right, and it's in the slides, right, the first time around, 2017, when Trump, right, became president, he was an outsider, right? The Republican Party was deeply Trump skeptical, right? The Republican establishment did everything they could to stop his efforts at winning the nomination, right? They threw all these candidates into the breach, and all of them failed, and Trump emerged victorious, and the party was horrified. We haven't talked about it yet, but we'll see that historically, political parties have had tight control over who the nominee was every 4 years. That stopped in the year 1972. And ever since then, it's we the people who get to choose. Within the party, but we the people, not the party elite. Because if the party elite had chosen in 2016, they would not have chosen Trump. They even said anybody but Trump. All right. So, right, he becomes president under conditions of a Republican Party in Congress that was deeply skeptical of Trump. Excuse me. And right, I apologize. And Republicans had small majorities in both chambers. So Trump had the trifecta then, right? The presidency, the House, the Senate, just like he does now. Bigger margins this time in the Senate. I think smaller margins in the House. And under those conditions, right, typically a president gets a lot done with Congress. Creates a tremendous legislative record of accomplishment. We saw that with Joe Biden in his first 2 years, right? Democrats controlled the House. They controlled the Senate. The Biden administration got crazy amounts of major legislation through Congress. It's an exemplary record. Now look, that leaves aside, right, contentious questions about that was a good law, that was a bad law, that was an okay law, that was a bad... I'm not even getting into that. I'm not going into those weeds. But just as a matter of legislative accomplishment, dang, as good as it gets. Right? And what did Trump get done under similar conditions in his first 2 years? Damn near nothing legislatively. He got those federal tax cuts through, but tax cuts are usually easy to get through. Who doesn't like tax cuts? But he did help get that through. And then he got some sort of symbolic legislation done on the federal criminal justice system. But our federal criminal justice system, right, is quite small. Where almost all the action is in terms of criminal justice is at the state level. And that's it. One major law, one minor law. Oh, damn. This time I think is going to be different, but we'll see. Why do I think it's different? That's a great question that you asked me. Let me answer it. I think it's going to be different this time around because we no longer have I think the Republican Party, the party elite, congressional Republicans are still Trump skeptical. In private, they're Trump skeptical. Look who the Senate Republicans, right, elected to be their leader, John Thune. John Thune was the least preferred candidate by Donald Trump. Now, he preferred Rick Scott out of Florida. Barring him, John Cornyn out of Texas, and Thune was third on the list. Who did Senate Republicans elect for leadership? John Thune. How did they do that? You know, how did they defy Trump and get away with it? It was a secret ballot. It was a secret ballot. So they could vote, the way they wanted to. Because, it is still the case. There's no question that Republicans in private will smack talk about Trump as a kind of a buffoon. But in public, right, they worship him because Trump, right, has such a huge number of Americans at the rank and file level who support him. I haven't seen yet how many votes he got in this election, but we know he's going to win the popular vote nationally. That's impressive. I'm assuming somewhere in the neighborhood of mid to high 70 million, right? So that's why, right, congressional Republicans are not going to cross that dude. And by now, right, almost all of the Trump skeptics within the party at that level are gone. He's chased them all out. So this is going to be a very different situation for Trump this time around, right? Instead of working with a Trump skeptical GOP in Congress the last time, this time he's going to have a Senate and House Republican group that's, and remember, votes in Congress are always public, except in these very limited circumstances like electing leadership within the caucus. So this is a party wholly owned by Donald Trump, fully dominated by Donald Trump. So I think this time he will, I think he'll move a legislative agenda through Congress this time in his first 2 years. It's going to be impressive. It's going to be a big deal. It's going to be like the opposite of what happened the last time around for him. It's going to look a lot more like what Biden did. I mean, ideologically and politically different, obviously. But in terms of productivity, I think it might look something like that. By the way, with similar massive amounts of federal spending. I told someone on social media, there are many reasons to vote for Donald Trump, for sure. But this idea that he's going to somehow get the federal deficit and debt under control, no, that's not why you would have voted for Trump. Because that's not going to happen. Didn't happen his first time around. It won't happen this time around either. He doesn't give a flying F about the deficit or the debt. He's not thinking about that. And look, neither are Democrats, right? That's become oddly sort of a non-issue politically. Some lip service on that, but nothing meaningful done in terms of action. That would be worth a lecture unto itself, of course. It's an interesting question. How much debt is too much? It's not clear. It's not clear. All right. So I think we're looking at that kind of a presidency. First 2 years, which is as far down the road as we can see. Now look, right? Him nominating 3 House Republicans to serve in his administration, that's going to make the House a little tricky. And there are Senate Republicans who are openly Trump skeptical to some limited degree. So they may put some brakes on some things. I don't know. But I think overall, Trump's looking at a very productive 2 years with Congress. If he fumbles that, I don't even know what to say. That he fumbled it the first time around makes more sense. That he would fumble it this time around wouldn't make sense. But Trump doesn't always make sense. So we'll see. But I'm fairly confident. So I think an exceptionally powerful presidency, at least the first 2 years. I do think Democrats will probably win the House back in 2026, right? Midterms are always a referendum on the sitting president, and almost always that referendum is harsh. So Democrats, right, will only need a few seats flipped to win it back. I think that'll probably happen. So Trump knows, I think, that his best chance to get things done with Congress, first 2 years. That was the case for Joe Biden. It was the case for Barack Obama. It was the case for Donald Trump the last time around. It's almost a rule of politics that's the dealio. You get backlash in the midterms. The price of power, winning the White House, is that 2 years later, typically you have trouble holding both houses of Congress. But worth the price, obviously, right? What else? So, who is he nominated? The most insane nomination, right, is Matt Gaetz to head up the Department of Justice. That's insane. There are highly plausible, very serious allegations that he is a child sex trafficker, that he has ingested massive amounts of illegal drugs into his system, that he's crossed nation-state boundaries to engage in sex trafficking. Wow. Okay. Okay. I don't think he's going to make it through the Senate process of advice and consent. I think even Republicans in the Senate will struggle with that. I don't think they can swallow that pill. I don't think they can. So, and they've already said as much. So, and there's a few others that are, I think, questionable. The guy that he nominated for Secretary of Defense, Hegseth, he has no managerial experience. He has served in combat honorably. Look, respect, man. But no management experience. Mostly experience being a talking head on Fox News, exclusive of his military career. And I don't think he's an entirely serious pick, but he might make it through. I don't have strong views on Hegseth. Whatever. And then Tulsi Gabbard for Director of National Intelligence. Again, pretty questionable. I don't know if she'll make it through or not. She's a bit of a case. Some of his other nominations have been quite serious and legitimate. And I don't know if I've told you guys that before. I've told my own ground sections. Trump, the last time around, a lot of what he did as president was perfectly normal. Any Republican or Democrat who would have done similar things to fit their own party's, agenda. But some of the things Trump does, right, are disruptive and outside of our traditional norms and traditions. Which in and of itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but if they deviate in ways that make us less democratic, which I think some of them have, I think that is problematic. But I don't think most people think in terms of the quality of our democracy. So that's maybe reserved exclusively for political nerds like me. I don't know. They just think, what have you done for me lately? I don't care how you get there, just get somewhere that does me some good. Very pragmatic approach. I understand that. So what do we know about some of these picks he's made, right? He's looking for total loyalty to Donald Trump. What did he do the last time around? He chose a number of people who were really good, but they weren't necessarily loyal to Donald Trump, right? They had a sense of professionalism. They had a sense of, I'm going to do this job the way I think this job should be done, using my expertise, my competence, my resume, my qualifications. I broadly share Trump's political values, of course. I'm a Republican, they would say. But I'm not going to do everything he wants me to do. I'm the Secretary of Defense. I'm not going to be micromanaged by the president. Right? What oath do you take when you assume these high positions? To protect and defend the Constitution, not the president. Right? But Trump is promoting what's called a unitary theory of executive power, where he micromanages all the heads of the agencies, and they do exactly what he wants them to do. Right? Where he'll tell the Attorney General, perhaps, these are my political enemies, prosecute them. What are you going to prosecute them for? I don't know. Find something and prosecute them. Don't use your own judgment. Use my judgment. All right. That's, again, right? It's not unconstitutional to do that. The Constitution clearly permits that, but it's just not done that way in America. It has never been done that way in terms of our democratic norms and procedures and traditions. Is you give your agency heads autonomy to do the job as they see fit. Right? That happened a lot in his first term, and he hated it. So he's not going to make that mistake again. I don't think it was a mistake, but for him it was a mistake. Right? He didn't have tight control over everybody. You're not supposed to. So he's looking for that tight control this time around. Right? Do you have competence and professionalism? No, not a problem, as long as you're loyal to me. Matt Gaetz, as Attorney General. What are his qualifications to be Attorney General? My God, he doesn't have any. He does have a law degree. I don't think he's ever practiced law. He's only been just sort of a firebrand, pro-Trump nut job in the House, and while committing sex crimes on the margins. Those are his qualifications. But he's loyal to Trump. Those are his qualifications. Yeah, Matt Gaetz is almost like a joke pick, a trolling pick, some are saying. Some Republicans are saying that. They're like, this isn't serious. That's not a serious nominee. Now, intriguingly, right, in addition to Trump, right, making sure this time that the people that he does end up getting are extremely loyal to him, because again, Trump's view is they took an oath to protect and defend me, Donald Trump. They don't take that oath, but that's the oath Trump would like them to take. Let's see, what was I going to say about that? So he's demanding this total loyalty. Oh, he's telling Senate Republicans, allow me to make mass, what's it called? Mass recess appointments. Mass recess appointments. In the Constitution, it does specify a process to some limited degree called recess appointments. And the idea behind that is, right, especially back in the day when we didn't have automobiles or jets and transportation was slow, right, that sometimes you might get a vacancy, right, in the Department of Justice, or the Secretary of Defense may die. Back then, people died all the time from all sorts of diseases because they didn't have vaccines and good medical treatments. Right, so you'd have these vacancies, really important vacancies. Right? It might take Congress might be out of session, and it might take them a month to get back into session. Right? So the idea was, under sort of emergency situations, a president here and there, under emergency situations, could get what are called recess appointments. Right? People that he just puts in these jobs. Without Senate advice and consent. And I think they can serve up to 2 years without that advice and consent. But that was, right, sort of break glass only in cases of emergency. And Trump's like, no. We're going to take the glass off of that fire extinguisher and just use it all the time. These will be mass-based recess appointments. All the people I want to put in these high positions, none of them will have to get Senate advice and consent. None of them. So go into recess, Senate, go on vacation, take a couple weeks off, and then I'll name my cabinet unilaterally. What? Again, not unconstitutional, because Article 2 does create a process for that. But the intention and the practice has been only in cases of extreme emergency. And Trump's like, we're going to make it routine. Right? And I thought once, and so he's been saying that. Senate Republicans are kind of hedging. And then he nominated Matt Gaetz. And I thought, oh, now it becomes a little clearer. I think he knows that Matt Gaetz won't get through Senate advice and consent. So let's not have it. Let me just put him there unilaterally. We'll see what Senate Republicans do. They haven't fully decided yet. My God, I hope they don't do that. Right? I mean, are Senate Republicans really willing to sort of abnegate themselves before the awesome power of Donald Trump and surrender their institutional role as a co-equal branch of the federal government, providing advice and consent on presidential nominations to the federal bureaucracy? Are they prepared to humiliate themselves institutionally for Donald Trump? Maybe. Maybe they are. Maybe they are. But we'll see. It's remarkable. Again, so Trump, being non-traditional in and of itself is not necessarily problematic at all, right? Sometimes you want to maybe deviate and experiment a little bit, but deviations and experimentations that cut against the deep grain of our traditional democratic norms and practices, I might have questions about that. All right. But again, it remains to be seen. So these are some observations that I think are genuinely useful. For political scientists, Trump's kind of a gift, right? Because he allows us to explore kind of the boundaries of our Constitution and the role of our democratic norms and traditions. Because we have in some ways, right, obviously a written Constitution, but I think we also have, much like Britain, an unwritten Constitution, right? Sort of ways of doing things evolved since the days of George Washington. That are really also part of sort of an unwritten Constitution. And Trump is seeking to flip some of those. And I'll put it this way, it's interesting. Certainly for a political scientist, it's like a natural experiment. Because I do think these are efforts to sort of move us, as I've suggested, I think. Right? Efforts to move us to sort of a hybrid model of constitutional democracy that we've had for almost 250 years. Sort of melded on, right, to some version of soft autocracy, eliminating the role of the Senate in providing advice and consent for presidential nominations to the federal bureaucracy. And look, we might experiment with that, and we the people may love it, and we may decide that's what we want, a hybrid model. And we've had enough of traditional constitutional democracy. It's no longer serving us. Let's create a hybrid model somewhere in between autocracy and constitutional democracy, sort of soft autocracy. We may decide that's what we want. Right? And interestingly enough, right, in a democracy, people can decide to do exactly that, of course. All right, so I've talked too long, as per usual. Check out my announcement on the short writing assignments, and have a fantastic weekend. And I will seek to catch up on some of those other things I haven't graded yet, some of those discussion threads, which, as you can see, I tend to grade them quite generously. As long as you do them, do 2 comments, and make a reasonably good faith effort to engage with the ideas. Thanks all. Take good care.